Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Shuck with Family Office Networks. Thank you for joining our Family Office Networks webinar series today. We have guest speaker Sue Ozdemir, CEO of Exro Technologies. At the end of our presentation today, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. There is a chat option for you on your screen, so please at any point you have questions, go ahead and type those over to us so we can answer accordingly. Sue, I will let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you everybody and good morning. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in and we'll leave lots of time for questions at the end. So what Exro does is we have technology which makes motors smarter, hence the name A New Brain for Electric Motors and Generators. How we do that is through the power electronics. Before I jump into the entire presentation, I'm just going to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about myself and why I joined Exro. So I am the CEO of Exro Technologies. I joined Exro in September of last year, so I've been on board for about 7.5, 8 months now. Prior to joining Exro, I've spent my entire career in the electric motor industry. My parents owned an electric motor repair shop growing up. I could repair an electric motor, not a car motor, an actual industrial motor, before I was 15 years old, and it's kind of just in my blood. As I became an adult, I went to work for WEG Electric. WEG is one of the top motor manufacturers in the world. They're based out of Brazil, and I worked for their Canadian division for 4 years in Toronto and 4 years in Calgary. While I was working for them in Calgary, GE approached me and asked me to start up their small industrial motors division for Western Canada. They had always done well. They're GE, they're one of the best in the industry, but they had struggled to take the Canadian market, and especially in Western Canada. At the time that I joined them is when it was booming and oil was doing well, but they just couldn't seem to get a presence. So they asked me to come on board, and I set it up like its own business unit. So we grew a team, started a warehouse, put in product, grew a distribution base, and over a 3.5 year period, we took the business to 83% increase. And so they asked me if I could move back to Toronto with my family and do the same thing in Eastern Canada. So I did that, and over about a 2.5 year period, we grew the business by about 25%, setting up a new distribution channel, OEMs, projects, warehousing, and product. And they promoted me to the Canadian sales leader for power conversion, which is a division under the GE Power Group, and it represents solar, marine, oil and gas, and motors. And after about 8 months in that role, we were really taking off with the motor division, and they asked me to move to North America, to go to Houston, Texas to lead their North American sales team for the electric motor division. And being part of GE, we all know that being in the US is kind of where all the great things happen. So I moved down to Houston with my family in late 2017. And after about a year in the role, they promoted me up to CEO of the small industrial motor division. We were a highly profitable division of GE, and they decided when all the changes were going through with EMALT to do an acquisition. So we put up our business unit and we did an acquisition to a company called Wolong Electric. I led the acquisition with 4 other GE executives, and at the end of the process, Wolong made me an offer. I was the only one of the executive team who received an offer to lead their CEO of their GE industrial business unit, and they had a 10-year branding agreement. So for all intents and purposes, we were still GE. We still had our logos and everything we did. We didn't change. Our factory was the same. Our commercial team and marketing and finance was the same, but we were paid by Wolong. And I did that for a year as one of the most challenging things in my career to date, but it was also one of the most rewarding. After 14 months with them, I had grown the business. We had a double-digit increase in year-over-year revenue. We were highly profitable. We had only lost 1 employee in the transition, and we needed to do everything. They were a legal entity only in China. They are one of the top 4 motor manufacturers in the world. They are one of the top 3 electric vehicle manufacturers in the world. And so it was a great company. So in September of this year, when I joined Exro, I had been approached over the summertime from a recruiter who made a very good case for why I should listen to Exro. I wasn't looking for a job at the time. After I spent a couple of weeks, probably close to a couple of months, speaking with the board and the different team and learning about the technology, what I really saw was a company that had some very novel and needed technology for the industry. And they didn't have any kind of strategic path on how to get that out to the industry. And smartly, the board had made the decision that now that they had come out of R&D, they really needed to bring in somebody from the industry to be able to commercialize that. So since I joined at the beginning of December, we've been doing a lot of fundraising. We've completed 2 successful oversubscribed rounds, but more importantly, we've been streamlining our innovation and really focusing it on markets and customers. And today I'm going to talk you through that whole journey. So what Exro does is really an electric program module. So it's technology, much like you'd imagine the chip in your computer. We like to say like Intel is to a computer. So much like you'd imagine the chip in the computer. The difference is when you're focused on powertrains, especially for mobility industry, that chip goes into a box. We call our box an electronic program module. And why we need to do that is because a chip in a powertrain needs to be cooled, needs to be protective of noise, and needs to pass functional safety inside of the vehicle. So how we do that is really important. Again, we are the technology about it, but we're building that house just like Intel built that computer so that we can be fast to market. How this works is it connects the leads of the motor into the power electronics. So what Exro is really doing is configuring the motor in real time and dynamically. So these algorithms are intelligent algorithms. They're customized to the existing motors and to the existing powertrain, and they tell it how to react quicker. So let me explain with a real life example. Imagine that you're riding an electric bike up a hill and you want it to go fast, but you need the torque to get up the hill. An existing motor is somewhat static. It doesn't have the ability to go fast and push speed. And you see manufacturers compensating for that. With our technology, it allows that one motor to become an electric gearbox. So it allows you to have a gear 1 and a gear 2. It's based on the physics of coil switching, which was really important to me when I joined the company because coil switching is a 100-year plus physics of electric motors. But what we've done is taken that physics and applied it to the modern world with electrification, and we're doing it fluidly and dynamically. And there's lots of papers on coil switching to support what we do and the numbers that we have, including our own that will come out this month. But nobody's been able to commercialize it into an actual product. So when you think about an electric motor, a lot of people don't realize the limitations of that electric motor. We've made the choice to focus on the mobility industry because there's a wide variety of applications and customer sizes that we can grow with for future long-term growth. Our technology is suitable for any variable torque application. So while today in the presentation, we're going to talk a lot about mobility, you could put this into a crusher in a mining application. You could put this onto a metal conveyor. You could put this onto an oil well application if oil wasn't so low. There's lots of applications that we could put this on, but we are focused on the automotive. So the way that the manufacturers are compensating for that need for speed and torque is by putting on multiple motors. So from anything from a Tesla where you see 2 motors to a newer startup like Rimac out of Europe, they have 4 motors. Even some of the major brands like BMW and Porsche are starting to use 2 to 4 motors. They're doing that so that one motor can drive that low-end torque that you need and one motor can drive that high-end speed. The bigger the vehicle, the more the need becomes. So as you move up the vehicle chain, you go from a small 2-wheeler to a 4-wheel passenger car, but then you start hitting the commercial vehicles. Those commercial vehicles have even more need for torque and speed. So what happens is then you start seeing heavy gearboxes. Again, they're just trying to get that high torque and that high speed application. The problem, of course, is that the more weight that they put into it, the less battery that they're going to be battery range they're going to be able to use. And we all know that's an issue, not to mention cost and space. So it poses a whole problem. So manufacturers are trying to balance that. I'm going to segue for 1 minute because in my presentations over the past 6 months, what I've realized is a lot of people don't realize really what makes up a powertrain and why it's so important that we make motors smarter, but we're doing it through power electronics. In every powertrain, again, we're using a motor, a platform of a mobility application, so a vehicle. Mobility meaning anything with wheels on it, from a lawnmower to an 18-wheeler. but even a conveyor or a compressor has a powertrain. It's just a different configuration. Every powertrain has a motor that's converting your electrical force to mechanical, a battery to store your energy, and a power electronics to control that energy flow. So if you can imagine now that what we need is access to the motor. What that means is we need the motor's leads to be coming out. They don't actually rewind the motor. There's no change in the manufacturer's manufacturing process, no additional costs. In final assembly of the motor, usually a manufacturer, and I say this having run the GE operations from the small industrial motor side, we would have, let's say, a 100 horsepower motor that's going to Florida is going to have 9 leads out of it. That exact same motor going to Canada will now only have 3 leads out of it. And if it's going to Europe, it may have 12 leads out of it. There's lots of leads. Manufacturers tuck the rest into the winding and they epoxy coat them. So you can't just pull them out as a retrofit. It's very expensive. It physically can be done, but it's expensive. So what we need is the manufacturer to leave those leads hanging out. Then those leads connect into the power electronics. That's exactly how it's set up today. Those leads are connecting from where you see the power electronics on the screen to the motor. What we're doing is implementing our technology into the power electronics and feeding the brain to the motor. We like to tell everybody that we are the next step in power electronics. And what we mean by that is, for any of you that have been following the electrification surge, how it's been going over the last 5 years, even right now, as we're in the middle of the pandemic, you see lots of pictures of how the world is changing because there's not so much pollution. So if you followed it on any level, when it first started, everybody was talking about how do you put in a motor to the vehicle? How do you make it go from gas to electric? And then it switched. They figured that out on a very basic level. Motors are motors. Then they went to batteries, and it was, how can we make it smaller, make it go farther? Now, for the most part, batteries are available that go farther. There's all kinds of issues with the battery segment as far as being able to mine for it, but in general, they're performing. The next step is the controller. How do we get more out of the powertrain through the controller? How do we make things through the controller? That is the current kind of trend, and it will continue to be the trend over the next 10 years. What we're doing is a novel new technology that's the next step in power electronics. By integrating our controller, and I'll show you it on the next slide, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to control the windings in a motor at the individual level. What that means for manufacturers, startup to established, is that we can expand speed, we can make higher efficiency. We're getting anywhere between 0.5% to 10% of overall efficiency level. So if I take it right down to what that means for consumers, it means that you're going to go farther on the same battery charge. We're going to have kilowatt per hour savings because we're optimizing the performance. In most cases, it means that the manufacturer can reduce or eliminate the mechanical gearbox. They can reduce the motor size. We're not going after a cost model where we're the cheapest electronics on the market. We're competitive, we're within the range, but it's about improving the technology. Overall, when they implement Exro, they get a savings, not just in the competitive advantage that we bring them, but because they're reducing a motor and reducing a gearbox, the extra electronic piece, the module that we're implementing, is offset. So just so that we all, again, stay completely aligned, I want you to see what it looks like. So if we were on a video call, or if I was sitting in front of you, you'd see the picture to the left where it says we are technology. It's a chip. Our chip is multi-level. This is a top view. This isn't our exact chip, but this is exactly what it looks like. It's a multi-level, and there's what we call switches in it. The leads of the motor feed into that to become the brain. That is Exro technology. On the right-hand side is the hardware that we've implemented into with existing partnerships, or that we have proof of concepts coming out over the next 6 months, so that customers are able to look and see and be fast with the product. What I learned coming on board in September very quickly in conversations with some of my network, some of the customers that we started dealing with, was, while they're very interested in the technology everybody's racing to the finish line in this segment. Everybody's trying to be first to market. So a lot of the big established customers that will be transformational for Exro aren't able to just implement technology until they know it's going to work in their vehicle. And as I talk through the rest of the presentation today, you'll hear about how our commercial strategies align to that. What this hardware has done for us, it's enabled us to be able to drop the projects in all within this year. So what you're looking at is what we call a module. On the top, you can see the different sizes that we have, and it's letting you know we can either be right inside the inverter that they're using. They can add an extra piece for our technology, whether we're doing that through a major tier 1 power electronics supplier like a Bosch or a TM4 Dana or somebody else, or we're just doing it with a generic brand. There's many of them. It doesn't matter. It's just the box that does it at that point. Or we are a third piece that goes in between the existing and just works with it. We are completely flexible. We are completely scalable. We can go in any style of motor. The topology of the motor is not the issue for us. It's the drivetrain and what the customer is trying to accomplish. All of our technology is patented. We have 15 granted patents. We have filed internationally, not in every single country, but in all the countries that would be impactful for manufacturing. Brazil, all countries in Asia, and different parts of the world, India. We have a comprehensive protection program. That means that we have an internal IT protection program where all of our technology and our algorithms are kept specifically on Exro computers. We have a great level of technology to make sure that as people leave the company, nothing goes with them. It's not an easy technology to figure out. It's not that difficult for us now that we have experience with the algorithms themselves and how they react to different torque curves. But there's a lot of protection in that. In addition, we utilize a law firm out of Western USA called Cozens. They're one of the top law firms for patent and for patents in North America. They worked with companies like Ballard Power in Canada, and we review all of our patents through there. We keep all of our patents up to date, and we review our patent policy about 2 to 3 times a year as a team to make sure that while we continue to innovate, we're protecting the patents that we filed that could come into play in future if they're not in play today. All of our motor switching technology has been third-party validated before I joined Exro. We hired a firm that came in and validated that our claims to produce an electric gearbox are true and valid, and that all of our results are verified with data from our labs. As we go into the presentation, I'm going to focus today on the motor and generator technology. They're exactly the same. The motor technology is proven. It's our focus right now as we commercialize on our journey, and it's where all of our proof of concepts sit. The generator is the exact same technology. We're feeding a brain to the generator. It works identically. A generator is basically a motor in reverse. Our proof of concepts in the generator will come out of our labs at the end of this year. And our focus segment there will be for the wind industry, especially smaller wind farms. And then the third piece of our technology that sits in our IP is a battery technology. Our battery technology has been in R&D for the past almost 18 months. It's an artificial intelligence. It is on our website, but today is actually the first time I'll be talking to a little bit about our battery technology as well. We do treat it as 2 different business functions. Our motors and generators are coil switching, intelligent algorithms, and our battery is artificial intelligence. But I'll introduce it today as we'll be coming out with more data on that over the coming months. So as we go into the commercialization journey of Exro, what you see right now in front of you is our proven technology. This is the proof of concept that went out in December of this year to our first commercial partner, which was Motorino. Motorino wasn't a big partner for us. They're a large electric bike assembler here in Canada. But as you can understand, I'm sure Canada doesn't have the warmest weather. So electric bikes don't ride all year long. So it's not as big of a market as we're going to experience when we get into Germany, Europe, Italy, China, India, Japan. So for us, this was about proving the concept, proving that we could create an electric gearbox. And what better way to do it than in a very mountainous city like Vancouver with an electric bike. So it's been a great partnership for us. After we installed our Exro algorithms, we were able to take their speed and torque up by 25%. We did that by reducing the motor size and by implementing our technology. So now when you push up the hill, you can get the torque that you need. In an electric bike, we're regulated, so we get 32 kilometers, but we're getting the torque that we need. What this really did that was just totally instrumental in our strategic plan was it gave us a platform. So from here, we were able to go into customers with cars and trucks and buses and say, here's our data points. If you work with us, if you partner with us, we can build this in a much bigger level and we can get you much bigger results. So from there, we go into my commitment. When I joined, I made some milestone commitments to the investors that I've been speaking to and to our team. The most important of them was that I was going to align our strategic plans and our company blueprint to executing deals that helped us to execute our innovation. So Motorino was our first deal. The second deal, and I apologize, they're out of order on the slide. The second deal was Potentia. Potentia was a deal that Exro had been working on before I joined. We closed it about 3 weeks after I joined, and it's an electric vehicle. Potentia is an electric motor manufacturer in Mexico. They've been in business for over 100 years, and they've been focused on electric motor manufacturing for the renewable industry. They work with customers like Caterpillar and GE to customize electric motors. And their family decided that they, being Mexican natives, that they wanted to help the pollution issue in Mexico. In Mexico City, the pollution is so bad that children are going to the hospital and people aren't able to drive cars on certain days. When it reaches a certain level, the government actually shuts it down and says you cannot drive your combustible engine car today. And that's all fine, but now you think about people that can't get to work because they can't get in a taxi, food that can't be delivered. So this company created a conversion kit because they're still not a fully developed country. So people can't just go out and buy $40,000 electric vehicles either. So they have created a very competitive conversion kit that takes commercial vehicles like taxis and delivery vans and converts them from combustion to electric engines. They signed a 3-part agreement with us. In September, they issued us a PO for $500,000 to supply the controllers. Again, think back to that powertrain. So the power electronics is a controller. So they gave us the deal to supply the controller. And then phase 2 is putting our electric algorithms into the controller to make it have an electric gearbox, reducing their cost. So that project will deliver in June. It is slightly delayed. We were supposed to deliver in February, and then we had delays with the parts from China due to COVID. What we did was we pulled, it was a multi-stage, so stage 1 was supposed to deliver in March, and stage 2 was supposed to deliver in June. And so we pulled ahead stage 2 and made sure that we're on time. So stage 1 and stage 2 will deliver at the same time. And so we will deliver to the customer in June. They'll do about 90 days worth of road testing, and it will provide us a proof of concept in what we call a 100-volt application. Our first motorbike was under 500 watts. This brings us up to a 50-watt application. The next deal that we signed was for Templar Marine. Templar Marine is piloting an electric water taxi with us. We are working hard with them. They have a lot of optimization that they're trying to do as they are new. This is a new product for them as well. So we continue in development, and we are intending to release our intended optimizations for that by summer of this year, by about July. The next deal that we signed was the snowmobile application. The snowmobile is a company in Europe called Aurora eMotion, who has created a snowmobile but also does tours of different areas across Europe using snowmobiles. In the snowmobile industry, they struggle with torque on startup as the gears can freeze, but they also struggle with weight because if the snowmobile is too heavy, it sinks into the snow and they can't dig it out. And then I'm super excited, as you are the first audience, to share that today we signed an initial deal, which came out in our press release this morning, for a company called Clean Seed Capital, which is a Canadian company who's done agricultural equipment for many years, but they're coming out with a new seeder for the agricultural industry, and they're looking to electrify a variety of equipment in the agricultural segment. That segment still uses almost 50% non-electric equipment. So it's a really important thing for our environment. But for us, there was 2 kind of key plays here. The first one is that Clean Seed has paid and will issue a PO for the development. All of the data and proof of concepts that we were able to provide by Motorino allowed them to see the longer term plan with us, and so they paid into that technology. And then second, it's a huge piece of equipment. I don't know where everybody's located, but if you've ever seen a large farm where they're farming, these equipments are probably as long as an 18-wheel truck if you take the width. So we're going from a small bike to this huge piece of equipment, which will open up the construction industry for us. And really what the deals are showing, what we're doing, yes, they're all smaller deals. That's a strategic move for us. What we wanted to do is not get our shareholders' money tied up in a deal with a BMW or a Tesla that takes us 3 years to get to proof of concept because of the functional safety testing that's required in the automotive world. So we are working some large deals in behind the scenes, and we'll be sure to share them as soon as we have them in a position where we have documents signed. And there's never any promises, but we feel good about where we are. But in the meantime, we're working with mid-sized companies that are flexible and fast to help us put proof of concepts out on the road. So we've now done a bike, a car, a recreational equipment in snowmobiles and watercraft, a large piece of agricultural equipment that will equivalent for tractors and tow trucks and diggers in mining. And then as you can see, there's a lot of different direction. We feel really good about the 8 deals. In fact, we've challenged ourselves as a team to see if we can reach 12. Part of the reason that we picked 8 was a balance of the amount of resources that we currently have on board, although we are recruiting. The current lab space that we have, we've made an announcement that our new lab will be in Calgary, which allows us to have a much larger space at a much lower cost than we had in our previous lab. Our previous lab will close in June and all of the equipment will move to Calgary. So it's not that we're running 2 different labs. We'll only be running the first lab. Our lab will officially open on Friday, and we'll be inviting people in once all of the restrictions are lifted. So in our future deals, you can look for hopefully some deals with a trucking company or something in the electric trucking world is what we're trying to target, and more larger equipment where we bring big value. In one of the applications that we just went through, there was a great example that we're going to start implementing into our decks. And we evaluated an electric truck. It's called a Class 6 truck. So they're larger, almost like larger than a FedEx delivery truck, let's say, like a garbage truck or a dump truck or something along those lines. So they're quite large. So now you take that same example of riding your bike up the hill, but you flip it to driving a truck up the hill. And now you put a bunch of load on that truck, whether it's cargo packages, dirt, or garbage, it doesn't matter. You're putting the load on the truck. The barrier to entry for the electric commercial truck industry now becomes they can only have that vehicle weigh so much before it gets pulled off the road, whether that's 25 ton or 29 ton, or it depends on the type of truck. So as they're pulling up that hill, it's called gradability. They can't make the grade of the hill and maintain speed. And there's no motor on the market today that's able to do that. Our recent analysis shows that we are able to improve torque and speed, just like we've done on the bike, but we can also improve gradability because we're giving that motor on the fly fluid chance to push the torque or speed that's needed. Again, it's increasing the efficiency and letting that battery go farther. In this application that we evaluated, including the one for Clean Seed, it's very similar. We were able to reduce the size of the motor that was used and reduce the size of the gearbox. So what that means is they were able to implement our technology. It was within thousands of dollars of what they spent. We haven't got, obviously, it was just announced this morning, so it could come in a few thousand less, it can come to a few thousand more. They were very happy with that because it allowed them to go into a market that they couldn't otherwise supply with motors and gearboxes that are on the market today. So keep an eye on us. We are working hard and we are excited about where that's coming. I'm always very careful with the global market size for a few reasons. It's staggering and overwhelming. And so I want everybody to know that that's why we're focused, because while we can go after so much, it's such a huge market. We need to be focused or we'll fail. And so just recently, Allied Research came out and said that by 2027, the electric vehicle market will be worth over $802 billion. That's a 22.6% increase. I know that China is going to play a huge part of that. But what I was amazed at as I read through it was that North America is actually the largest growing cash car in the world. Europe's pretty close behind it. So while Asia has a big percent of that market, NAM is actually driving the biggest growth number. So let's take that down a bit farther, because I'm not suggesting that I'm selling a $100,000 car. So how many units are going out on the road? Because every unit is going to have a minimum of one of our controllers, technology for our controllers. 26.9 billion units on the road by 2030. Under 3% of the fleet right now is electric. That's going to go up to 30% of the fleet. Then we take that outside and say electric motors are the single biggest consumer of electricity. So we can work, as I said, in other industries as well, as we build up the team and as we start commercializing here and feel more comfortable with where our strategy is taking us. And then I'm going to take it down one more level for you that's not on the screen. If you look at just the inverter market alone, it's a $7 billion market by 2025, not even 2027, by 2025. Every major motor manufacturer is starting to play in the automotive electric vehicle world. They have to. And so $7 billion worth of inverters, if we have just a small portion of that, if we have just one of the major players that deal with us in the next 2 years, it will be a success. So right now, obviously with COVID, things are slowing down and nobody's quite sure. I can tell you that I was on a conference call with a company in Germany this morning who told me that they are back on remote work. That means that they're not working every single day. They're working 4 days on, 1 day off in some segments, and 3 days on and 2 days off in other segments as they try to make their new normal. We've seen delays and we are actively communicating internally and externally with our customers and with our shareholders to communicate our delays. We don't know when the market will come back fully, but for a company like ours, it's almost a blessing in disguise from a research perspective, because it's allowing us the time to put these proof of concepts on the road. And so by the end of this year, as I announced in my shareholders update 2 weeks ago, we'll have a proof of concept with the bike, which is finished. We'll have the proof of concept in an electric vehicle, which would go to Potentia. We'll have a proof of concept in a large powertrain application, which is a 400 volt, 150 kilowatt that will go into clean seed. To give you an idea of the importance of clean seed, bigger than the agricultural industry is, the 400 volt, 150 kilowatt comprises 80% of the large electric vehicle market. So when we complete that, it will take about 6 months. When we complete that, we'll be proving the proof of concept to the majority of the market. And then we have another deal that we're hoping for, and we like to say we can smell the bread in the oven, but there's no guarantee, that is going to be a 600 volt application, 300 kilowatt. That would show us the full range of pretty well 90% of everything in the mobility industry. And every single one of those projects, even if we don't get a matching partner for the 600 volts, we'll be doing that in-house. And we have ways that we can put it into a vehicle ourselves with our support of our existing customers and our board members. So everything will be out before the end of this year. So we're really excited about that opportunity. The other benefit that working from home has provided us is the ability to talk to customers that were otherwise tied up, myself included. Travel takes up a huge amount of time, and we don't think about it until it's removed. So now we would struggle to get a hold of some of the customers, key people. We're finding that every single week we're lined up with customer calls, talking to customers and evaluating the situations. We're not taking everything that comes to our door because we want to make sure that we use our finance and our resource as best as we possibly can. I'm going to talk very quickly about the intelligent battery management system. So again, it is a separate business function within our group, and it's a separate team. So we have 2 teams working the 2 different technologies, but it is something that we've worked on and that we've used our funding to do over the past year and a half. When I started with Exro, I put it on hold because I wasn't quite sure that we had the right model to go out to market. Initially, the model was driven by using artificial intelligence to read the cells of the battery at an individual level. And as the cell of the battery degraded and affected the whole module, we would be able to use that artificial intelligence to feed the degrading cells with the performing cells. And the technology is working. We've done all kinds of cycles tests, and the technology is working, which is fantastic and exciting. The cost model as we go into the smaller passenger car is not as exciting. It's not horrible, but it's definitely a cost play in the battery world. So what we've done now is we've looked into it with a little bit more detail over the past 3 weeks. And as the weeks come up over the next 8 weeks, probably right towards the end of June and July, you'll see some more information coming on our website and in our presentations and webinars. We're using our intelligent battery management system to evaluate a first-like vehicle. So that's a battery out of your electric car. We collect it in through our partners, our targeted partners, and we evaluate it to eliminate the hazard or risk of that battery, be able to certify that it's usable for storage. So it's called second life in the battery world. And it's definitely where the industry is going, because there is not enough mining going on today to keep up with any of the battery chemistry, whether it's lithium, which is so popular. You think back to that $800 billion industry and $26 million, 26 million units on the road. The mining is not occurring right now to keep up with that demand. So they're going to have to do something. The life of the battery in a car is somewhere between 8 and 10 years. So it's kind of the cusp of the technology to be able to say that we're going to take these cars, evaluate them, and use them. It's already being done in other parts of the world. Nissan has done it with their Leaf. They ran into some initial problems, but they're figuring it out. New technology always has problems in the beginning. So our technology is working. The artificial intelligence is working. We call it bytes. It takes bytes that tells you that it's learned. The results have been outstanding for us, and we're just going to continue to put our commercialization plan together with that. From a corporate structure, we have 93 million shares outstanding. When it's fully diluted, about 11 million of them go to management and options. We have very little warrants out. We've only issued warrants against fundraising. We've just completed a fundraise at the end of February. We were out raising 3 million. We oversubscribed and we closed our round at 4.3 million. So our bank account is strong right now. We technically have enough to get us through the rest of the year in the bank today, but the Calgary facility does require some larger equipment, which was part of our fundraise. We're moving ahead with that fundraise. We've made some pauses and delays to make sure that we can get as far as we can, but we figure we'll be out raising at the beginning of the third quarter to keep going with the demand that we're seeing right now from customers. That means that right now, we probably will be out somewhere at the beginning of July to be able to support. From a management team perspective, I've told you about myself. John is a lifetime CFO who has done an amazing job for us. He's very familiar with the small caps market, having spent about 15 years with Hayward Securities as well. We have Josh Sobil, who joined in November. Josh was a colleague of mine at GE. We both started around the same time, and he moved on to Siemens about 9 years ago. And Josh joined me in November. And our CTO is Ari Berger, who joins us with a master's in control engineering from the Israel Institute of Technology and has relocated to Canada. Our board of directors, most notably, we have Mark Godsey as the outgoing CEO of Exro, who's our chairman of our board. Mark is a serial entrepreneur who has co-founded 2 of North America's most successful biopharmaceutical companies with ID Biomedical and Angiotech. And so one of them was a vaccine that has went on to save millions of lives around the world. And the other company was for the coating for the titanium heart stent. And then the rest of our board is just really well aligned to where we need to be for our future. So Jill is instrumental in how we raise and our sustainability planning. Frank is a lawyer with over 40 years experience and helps us with governance and regulation. Dan is currently the CEO of American Semiconductors, and so helps us with corporate planning, but also he is a poster child for IP infringement. He's actually featured in a 60 Minutes document called the Great Brain Robbery, where he sued the Chinese government for stealing his IP at American Semiconductors and won. Eamon Percy is the past president of PowerTech Labs and VP of operations for Ballard, so helps a lot from a strategic position on our operations. And Jonathan Ritchie is a co-founder of the Initial Technology. We've developed it a lot in our labs since our initial days, but Jonathan was the initial founder of Exro. And then finally, from a business advisory board, I have created this board in November as I started to really help me to go fast with communicating and executing our commercial plans. And Daryl Wilson is the chairman of our business advisory board. He's a retired GE executive officer from GE Power. We have Andreas Truckenbach, who's a retired past head of advanced vehicle engineering for Daimler Chrysler, and Varel Nika, who currently is the services director for Schneider Canada, and he's a motor and drive engineer. And Werner Kurtz was our latest, who's a retired Siemens motor and drive engineer for over 35 years and just brings us an amazing amount of technological experience. And that's our Exro story. So I'm going to open up now for any questions. And I'm here to answer, and hopefully you've enjoyed our technology, and we'll keep following us.
Thank you so much, Sue. We have a question from Patrick. He says he's asking, how does this product differ from a variable frequency drive?
It differs in the fact that a variable frequency drive, first of all, a variable frequency drive is generally in an industrial application versus on an automotive application, and it would integrate into a variable frequency drive. So if you were to open up that VFD, you'd see a bunch of chips and panels and wires inside, and they would have to accommodate our additional chip and the heating and cooling that it would require. So we integrate, a VFD would be a great example of a powertrain outside of the mobility industry. It feeds, a VFD creates a brain to a motor, and a controller or a power electronics in a car is the brain of the motor.
Another question, if the automotive market goes into this, they can just develop this technology themselves or ask their electric motor suppliers to develop the solution. Is Exro still relevant at this point?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So again, yeah, that possibility exists. It's one of what we would call our competitive risks, is a shift in technology. I think we're probably way ahead of anybody being able to do it. We've been in research and development for over 8 years. We've invested over $20 million to get us where we are today. In conversations with the automotive, they haven't been able to develop what we've been able to develop. On top of that, the algorithms are completely specific to the motor and drive that we're controlling. So while Ford may come up with something, that would mean that Chrysler and Tesla and everybody else would be lagging behind to get that same advantage. So I would say in years to come, we may face that competition as we get more momentum and it's gaining fast. I think that there would always still be another partner that would need us, because they would have to redevelop everything from the beginning to be able to take it from their application to somebody else. Our technology is patented in many, many different forms and functions. So we feel like we've done as much as you possibly can to ensure security for the business.
And we have another question. It says, what is your current company valuation?
Our current company valuation, we were up quite high today, is probably, it's around $40 million.
And Paul is asking, you have a wide range of opportunities with great technology, but how is your team making decisions on where to place your time in landing the best revenue deals?
So we have two things that we do. The first thing that we've implemented in the last 4 months is we call it deal or no deal criteria. So we have a risk management call that takes in 3 of the leaders on our team, sometimes 4, somebody from the technical, the commercial who's representing the customer, myself, and John, our CFO. And we look at the deal and we decide, number one, are we really bringing enough value to make that customer go into high volume for us? The second question, and there's a long list, I'll just kind of give you 2 or 3 of the key ones. The second question is, do we see revenue in the next 24 months that's over $2 million? And the third question is, if we don't see the revenue, do we see a partnership? We call it the trampolining theory. So do we see a partnership that allows us to get into a customer that would otherwise be hard? For example, one of the partners that we've signed works with one of the largest automotive manufacturers, with Bosch's and Borg Warners and other kind of key names. So part of the deal is that if we prove it out, they are the lead into that supplier to show what we're doing. So there is a list of about 10 questions that we have to answer before we take in that project. So that's why I said we have many calls a week. We don't do every single project just based on where we are today as a company. In 12 months, we may be able to say we can take on different projects, but each development project takes our team about 4 to 6 months. We have the ability to handle approximately 3 projects in that 4 to 6 months at a given time. And we are recruiting right now, so we should be able to get up to about 6 projects. So we have to tee them up. Another thing that we do is if we're really not sure, we ask the customer to send us the motor data or the equipment up front, and we spend about a week analyzing and evaluating before we make that final decision. So the deal or no deal process for us is quite intensive and is key as a smaller company to how we execute.
Great, thank you. And Robert is asking, how much money was raised so far and what is the burn rate?
Our burn rate is $350,000 a month. We've raised approximately just about 25 million from start to finish. Since I've been on board, we have raised just about 6.5 million. We raised 1.8 million in September, which when I joined, we were very, very low. We were on fumes, and I knew that coming into the company. So we raised according to the deals that we had at the time. And then, as I mentioned, in February, we went out for 3 million to take us through. Initially, the plan was to take us through about 6 months, which is the $350,000 burn, plus the investment that we needed for the development project and the CapEx. And we've been able to manage to pull that about 8 or 9 months now, with some changes that we've made internally to get through the next, the past few months. We've raised 6.5 million since I started in September, and about 25 million to date.
Great. And let's see, Robert with another question. EPM contains inverter and BMS or separate unit?
Yes, they are separate units and separate functions. So the EPM is the electric power module, which is either a separate model or an integrated model on the motor switching for motors and generators. The BMS is a battery management system, which is the artificial intelligence that is at a circuit level, and they are 2 different systems.
John, he's asking, do you have plans to pursue the offshore, underwater, deep sea markets related to electric powered, remotely operated vehicles?
Not at this time. Again, it just comes down to a resource issue. The projects that we're looking at that go into commercial vehicles, that go into the battery world, that go into cars, performance cars in particular, will take up a lot of our resource right now. The underwater motors themselves are completely, even the water taxi one has been more challenging for us than other motors. They're completely encapsulated, and beyond that, there's just a lot more consideration when you're encapsulating for heat considerations in the power electronics. So I wouldn't say that we would never get into it, but it's not something that we would entertain for the next 12 months. No, if anybody wants to do a follow-up or find out more information about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. All of our contact information is available either through the Family Office Network or off of our website. And there is a section on our website where you could go. It's very easy, right on the home page, where you can just put in your email address, and then you'll be connected to all of our news. And we see some exciting times coming up. So I encourage you all to follow us, and we'll be out raising in the summertime, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
And actually, one more question did come through. He says, you mentioned you have a chip in your EPM. Is this your own chip?
Yes and no. So yes, right now we're building them in-house. It's our own algorithms on there, so we're very careful about where we put those out to. But we do have a supply chain set up that can build them for us, that's been audited by our supply chain team, and that we've shared the data with.
Okay, Sue, well, I think that's it for now with the questions. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on our Family Office Network's webinar series, and we will look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you so much.